These are the heroes and villains of my houseplant collection. I'm going to take you through all of my favourite houseplants that I own in this house, as well as those that I'm not really enjoying, as well as those that are behaving badly. So just above my sink area in my kitchen, I have probably my favourite houseplant in my collection, which is the philodendron Birkin. So this is a bit of a marmite plant. You either love it or you hate it. But I absolutely love the pinstripe variegation in the leaves. Let me know in the comments what you think about this plant. It's not to say it's not without its problems, because it is highly sensitive to overwatering, I think. When you give it too much water, the roots, they soak up too much, and then the new white leaves that come out, they come out brown and mushy, and they die and they fall off. So I have to be really careful watering this plant, not to give it too much, but that is my favourite houseplant. Just above me here is another one of my favourite plants, the pothos devil's ivy. And the thing I like about this is the fact that I've got it trailing along this picture rail. So I've got little hooks on the picture rail, and I've kind of teased the stems into them to grow along there and along there. So the idea is to get it to go all the way around, maybe, and all the way around there above the window as well. Put some hooks along the window. It'll be a nice kind of plant to grow around the room, and I really like it. So just here on top of this IKEA cabinet with some grow lights on top, doesn't get much light this spot, so I've got grow lights to help out. I have what could be a hero but is a villain. It is the traidscantia tricolour. When in rude health, absolutely stunning plant, one of my favourites. The variegation in the leaves, pink and green colours, beige colours. Absolutely stunning, but as with all traidscantias, they tend to die back if you don't give them the room to grow that they desire. So you get loads of dying leaves, and the stems eventually kind of die back. So it's dead easy to propagate again, as the same with all traidscantias. So I probably will have to reset this plant, cut this back, propagate it, maybe keep it, but then just have another backup for it. So unfortunately it's a bit of a villain. So on this bench in my dining room in front of my window, I've got two very nice orchids. I've had these about 3 months, I think. I bought them from Homebase, my local DIY store here in the UK, and they just not stopped flowering for 3 months. They're absolutely gorgeous, looks really healthy. The leaves are really healthy as well. I tend to give it a water every week really, just so the bark doesn't dry out too much, doesn't tend to hold on to too much water. But look at the flowers on that, absolutely stunning. And there's a new one just starting to open up at the back there. So when eventually these do start to die off, I'll probably cut them back, and then hopefully a new flower spike will sprout. It looks like there's one starting just there actually. So it'd be quite easy to get that to sprout back. Got an orchid care guide on the channel if you want to check that out. I do recommend orchids in your collection. I think they really brighten up the spot. Over here we have a villain, another villain. This is the Syngonium red arrow. So I used to have this plant where I have my macrame hanger, the mother plant, and it basically died on me. Wasn't sure why, it might have been getting too much light. So I managed to get some cuttings from it before I chucked it out, and I propagated it. And this was looking nice and healthy in this spot, away from the light. But it's since getting a little bit crispy again, brown around the edges. So I've had to cut those off, and I've repotted it to give it some more soil. I didn't think it was lacking a little bit of soil and nutrients. So we'll see if it rebounds from that, but this guy just seems to want to misbehave all the time. Just over here is a plant that's actually surprised me, because for the longest time, before I owned it, I didn't really like the look of it. I always thought it looked a bit ugly, but I found it in Lidl. I think it was £6 for a plant. It's grown on a bit, it was about that size. So I thought, why not? I'll give it a go, and I quite like it. You know, seems to happily live on that spot there. Gets lots of bright light. Fiddle-leaf fig this is. It's kind of growing on me every day. Easy to look after. And I just like the kind of shape of the leaves, the dark, deep green colour. Does need a repot because this pot's too small for the size of the plant. It's grown on quite a lot since I bought it. So I need to repot it, but it's definitely one that has surprised me. Tucked away in the corner here, in my dining room again, is my pride and joy at the moment. Absolutely stunning plant at the moment, because if I can get it without destroying everything, it is beautifully in flower. So this is the lipstick plant. I can't remember the scientific name for it, but it just produces tons of flowers for absolutely ages. They're quite unusual flowers. They look a little bit odd, a little bit phallic in some situations, but I don't know, it just looks really, really gorgeous. Really bright and colourful, really easy to look after. If you give it lots and lots of light, it's a bright spot there right in front of that window, then the flowers will just produce all year long, all summer long should I say. It's a really nice plant. I highly recommend adding that to your collection. This over here, Chinese money plant, is maybe my least favourite plant in the house. Because, oh look at the state of it. It's got a long central stem that's all wonky. All the leaves are falling off the bottom as they do. And the leaves, I've got holes in from when I overwatered it, gave it too much water as I was treating the soil for fungus gnats. It's got some pups at the bottom to kind of fill it in a little bit, but not too much. And just generally, just don't like the way it looks. It keeps bending the stem. I think I've been rotating it, and maybe that was a bad thing to do. Maybe I should have just left it to one side. And I've got it tied to this stick to kind of help it grow straight, but it doesn't seem to want to do that. Whoops. So I think what I'll do, I'll probably end up cutting it, replanting it to grow new roots and turn it into a new plant, and then propagate these pups as well, and just kind of restart with the plant. So hidden in the corner here is another one of my favourite plants, the jade plant. And this one is absolutely gorgeous. Look at that, what a specimen. So I really loves that spot in that corner because it gets good hours of morning sun. It's 11 o'clock here now, and the sun's just still beating on it, and it really loves that. The leaves are nice and big, the gaps on the stems between the leaves is nice and short, so you know it's getting lots of light, and it's just generally a really healthy plant. I like the way I've kind of shaped this plant as well. Nice and bushy, lots of pruning to kind of bush it out. It's growing lots of new stems. So if you haven't got a jade plant in your collection, I really do recommend it. In the corner here, it's probably one of the most confusing plants that I've ever owned. It's a type of peperomia, can't remember exactly what type. But for whatever reason, the stems die back. I mean, look at that. What's going on there? So this has been happening for a while, and I did think it was an issue with underwatering because it's in this terracotta pot. So I have upped the watering, feels reasonably heavy, but again, at the base of the plant, you can see it there, it seems to rot away and die. It might have a disease or something, I'm not sure. I need to look at the roots and the soil. So I'll probably, to save this plant, I'll probably propagate it and put it into a new pot to rescue it. But unfortunately, it's a bit of a villain. So on here, on this shelving unit, on this windowsill in my dining room, I've got one of my favourite pothoses, the Marble Queen. And I've got it growing up this traidscantia trellis that you can check out the link to in the description of the video. But all the leaves, never had any issues with whatsoever. They really lovely variegation, really strong variegation, lots of white in those leaves, and it's growing very nicely, and I really do like it. In my living room fireplace mantle, I have a Chinese evergreen, or aglaonema. This is a tigres, I believe it's called, and this is one of my favourite plants. Absolutely gorgeous. The leaves on it, kind of variegated light green and dark green. It's not really giving me any bother whatsoever. I've had it about a year, and that there, bit of browning on that leaf, is the only trouble I've had. Seems very happy in this spot. It's about 2 meters away from that window, so it doesn't get tons and tons of light, but it pushes out new growth. There's new growth coming through the middle. So it's a very happy plant, and I absolutely love it. This plant here is unfortunately one of my villains. This is the philodendron melanocrosum, and I mean it looks absolutely stunning, but for me, it's been very, very fussy. So I got it at the beginning of winter last year, one of my unboxing videos I did. and it was looking absolutely gorgeous when I got it. I was very excited about it. But the first two leaves they tried to push out, you can see it there, one there and one there. They just disintegrated essentially. They turned black and died off. Luckily, the newest one that sprouted last month seems okay, and there's a new one sprouting as well now. So I think it might have just been shocked because it was travelling through cold weather and it didn't really like it, and it was settling into its new spot. So hopefully it's over that, because I think they do look absolutely stunning when in full health. The only issue is it now looks a little bit leggy with this large gap in between these leaves at the bottom and this leaf on the top. So, but unfortunate. Here is my second favourite philodendron behind the philodendron Birkin, and it's the philodendron Brazil. Again, I've got it climbing up a traileaf trellis, looking very handsome. Very, very easy to look after plant. It's very forgiving. Doesn't really do anything naughty like browning leaves or anything like that. Very, very unfussy, and the leaves are just absolutely stunning. Light green and dark green variegation. You can see where it gets the name from, Brazil. It's one of my favourite plants. So I mentioned I much prefer the peperomia raindrop to the Chinese money plants, and you can see why. Much fuller, healthier looking plant. The leaves, deep dark green. It's just generally a much nicer plant. This is one of my favourite plants in the house. Very unfussy, likes the spot he lives in. A couple of yellowing leaves at the base, but I think that's just to do with age really. It does tend to be a little bit thirsty, so it probably does need a little bit of watering. But lots of new growth at the top. It's a very handsome plant. So here on my fireplace mantle in my dining room is the Monstera adansonii. And I've spoken about this before on the channel. I described it in one of my videos as the ugly duckling to the Monstera deliciosa. And that was because it wasn't really healthy in my house. It kept getting brown leaves around the edges. But since I put it onto this traileaf trellis, got it climbing up a little bit, and I cut out all the browning leaves and I kept it well away from the light, kind of growing on me a little bit more, looking a little bit healthier. The leaves, nice deep dark green colour. So it's a bit of a turnaround for this plant. Up here, hanging on this macrame hanger, I've got one of my villains of the house. So this is a traidscantia, type of traidscantia, purple pallida. And as you can see, the leaves are dying back on the stem, so it's getting bare stems. And this tends to happen with most traidscantias because they're not really happy indoors. They much prefer to kind of spread and take over a field. When they're hanging from a pot, they tend to weaken the stems and they die back. I've got a video on that you can check out. But yeah, it's quite a nice plant when it's looking quite full, but eventually, as with all traidscantias, they kind of end up looking a little bit rubbish. If you're in the market for a calathea, then I highly recommend the calathea eldergrass. This is probably my favourite calathea because it's so easy to look after. It doesn't tend to go brown and crispy around the edges of the leaves. This one is very happy. Again, it's probably, what, 2-3 metres away from the window, so not getting tons of light, but continuing to push out lots of new growth. There's new spikes coming from the base. Does still get crispy leaves on the tips, but doesn't get anything too drastic. Can live with that really. It's when they kind of take over the whole leaf, the brownness, that I have problems with. But this plant is very nice, and does normally flower actually. Nice yellow flowers about this time of the year. So I'm wondering whether they're going to start coming through. They're quite nice, but a really healthy, easy to look after plant, the calathea eldergrass. Over here, again in my dining room, in this nice sunny spot, is my peace lily that I moved into a container of water with decorative stones, and I did a video on how to do that, and this is looking absolutely gorgeous. Look at all those flowers with this peace lily. Looking really vibrant. All you have to do is just change the water every week, every 2 weeks, give it some feed every month, and they seem to really love it once they adjust. And that one, looking really handsome, one of the heroes. A quick shout out to a Chinese money plant that I have down here. This isn't normally one of my favourite plants. I don't really like it. I much prefer the peperomia raindrop. Got nicer leaves and it's easier to look after. But this one is flowering. This one always seems to flower every year. My other ones don't, but this one does. And I think it's because it's sat on that spot there, right in front of this big window, so it gets lots of morning sun. I mean, the flowers don't look that impressive, but still quite nice to get this plant to flower. It's a very bushy Chinese money plant. Normally they grow really tall and leggy and you lose the bottom leaves, but it doesn't seem to be happening. Well, it is happening with the main stem in the middle, but it's got loads and loads of pups around the edge to fill it in. So this is actually a Chinese money plant that I really like. This here is an absolute staple of the house. I think this is maybe one of the second or third plants we ever bought for this house. I've had it absolutely ages. We've had it about, must be 6-7 years or so. Monstera deliciosa, and it's grown massively. It was a little plant from IKEA. We plunked it here and it's just grown and grown and grown. And it's grown so big, I don't know how we're going to get it out of this room. But really love the Monstera deliciosa, the fenestrations, and no perforations in these leaves at the moment because it's not getting that much light. This kind of is about 2 meters away from the window and it kind of faces northwest. It doesn't get any light really, any direct light anyway. Monstera's like lots of light. It's in a pot without any drainage holes and it doesn't seem to mind that as long as you watch the watering. And I've kind of tried to support it with these bamboo sticks here. I'm not sure whether I'm very successful at doing that. The only problem with this plant is the leaves are so big that it gets dusty constantly, so you're constantly having to clean it, which is a bit annoying. But other than that, absolutely staple of the house. Down here is another villain from the unboxing video or delivery I got from that company. I'm not blaming the company, I think it was just the fact that the plants travelled through cold weather and then they were adjusting into my house. Essentially this is a philodendron verrucosum and all the leaves went crispy and brown and I had to cut them off. I think that is maybe these two are the only ones that survived on the original leaves. All these new ones in the middle, smaller ones are new ones, and they seem to be relatively blemish free apart from this one here. There's a little bit of a water damage mark on the edge where I got some water on it accidentally. So this seems to be recovering, but it's been a bit of a struggle to get it into this spot. So I have to give a quick shout out to these that have become heroes. They were villains last year, but they've become heroes. And this is a Begonia rex, I think, and that's another type of begonia. When in rude health, absolutely stunning plants. Last year, particularly this one, kept getting brown crispy leaves, but since winter, it's just pushed out loads and loads of new growth and it looks really full. The same with that one, it looks very handsome. You're always going to get dying leaves at the base of the plant, but you just pick those off and that's fine. I think essentially begonias just don't really like it in the winter, especially here in the UK. So once spring comes, they kind of come alive and they look relatively decent for the remainder of the year, but these ones have had a bit of a turnaround. And just in the corner here, this is a cutting of the Ficus elastica teneki mother plant down there. So I took this maybe 1.5 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. It's grown very handsomely. So with ficus plants, you need to put them in as bright a light as possible to get them to push out lots of new leaves. And this one does at a very rapid rate. So I did cut it back, the main stem there, to get it to branch out, and that's exactly what it did. 2 nice branches to give it a tree-like structure. It's just a really handsome plant, one of my favourite ones. Just above my lipstick plant is probably the most prolific grower that I've ever known, at least in my collection anyway. This is the traidscantia, I can't remember the scientific name, but it's called teddy bear vine. And this was a tiny cutting that I found on the floor of my local nursery. I wasn't prop lifting, but there was a little cutting on the floor. So I thought I'd nab that, put it in my pocket, and then put it in some soil to get it to propagate. It did within a couple of weeks. And it's grown into this monster, and I've also got one there. I think I've got 2 in my living room. And it just grows so quickly. I mean, look at the state of it. So bushy. And this is actually a traidscantia that doesn't look too bad. It seems to keep its leaves quite nicely. And it also flowers. And I really like the texture on the leaves. So it's a really fantastic plant. I just can't believe how quickly it's grown. I think I've had it 1.5 years and I've managed to grow it from a little cutting into that massive plant. Here are 2 Dieffenbachias. These are so fussy. If you've got any tips on how to look after these, then please let me know, because the leaves always go brown and mushy. Seems very sensitive to overwatering. So I really do cut back on the watering with these guys. And I've had to cut so many leaves off that it's looking quite bare, quite skinny, these plants. And there's a leaf in there that is going brown, a little baby leaf. So I've kept it well away from the sunlight. That seems to have helped a little bit, and I've really cut back on the watering. But once the damage is done, I just kind of end up with leggy looking plants. Down here I have a little rehab station with a grow light and some plants that are quite fussy. But I really do love this, the Oxalis triangularis. I did a video on my Patreon page on how to get this out of dormancy to get new fresh leaves coming out, and it looks like it's flowering actually. And once you get this plant going, healthy and strong, it looks absolutely stunning, so big fan of that one. And then I have, hands down, the fussiest plant in the whole entire world, I think. The Calathea zebrina, which always gets crispy brown leaves, but I've rehabbed this plant. It was bigger, but it had loads and loads of crispy leaves. It was the right shambles, but I've cut it right back. It's growing new leaves now, and I've water with water conditioned water, API water conditioner. And I've got it under my grow lights, and so far the new leaves that are coming out are looking quite healthy.